Hello, hello. Welcome, Awake TV family. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy Monday. This is Chris Alicia, your host of Intentionality, aligning to the divine intention. And intentionality means exactly that. It means understanding the divine purpose, intention behind every single aspect of life. The people that you meet, the way that you are, the gifts that you have, the way that flowers grow and birds fly, and the sun feeding down to the plants, and the plants taking our carbon dioxide and turning it into oxygen for us. It is perfection. Understanding that perfection, understanding that divine blueprint that makes the world work the way that it does, allows you to get into flow with the universe. It's a divine flow with the universe. Understanding not only your place in it, but everything else's place as well. So you really come to understand the creator that you are. And that is all that this show is about, is tapping into that divine flow, understanding how the makeup of the universe not only affects your life and affects everything around you, but how it taps into every decision that you make, into every relationship that you have, into every thought that jumps into your head. Understanding the flow of the universe allows you to take back your power. So I'm very, very excited for the topic today. Last week we talked about reincarnation, which is a huge topic to understand. It is very important to understand the purpose of reincarnation because it sizes up and influences each and every life. But one of the big questions when you're talking about reincarnation, if we have multiple lives, is what are we doing in between those lives? What are we doing in the space in between when we are not in a physical form? Where do we go when we die? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Do we get punished? Do we get judged? Is it like that movie, Defending Your Life, where you're going up in front of a judge with two lawyers trying to defend your actions in life? Do we have jobs? This question really serves at the heart of our fear of death, our fear of dying, our fear of losing other people. What happens when we die? Well, this show is all about that. This show is all about the life between lives. What happens when we leave this physical form? And what happens right before we come back? I have a soul sister out there, and I don't know if she's watching this episode today or if she'll catch it later. I've had the privilege of working with her in her Akashic records, of going into her Akashic records with her to discuss her son, who she recently lost. The overwhelming information that he's providing about their soul connection, him and his mother, and how their connection in the physical life is a drop in the bucket of their lives together. And that his work continues on in the spiritual realm. In fact, he's more powerful there than he could ever be in a physical world. He can make more of a difference. And that understanding that this life, this flesh, is a millisecond of our entire existence. And all the real work happens when we're outside of it, really puts life into perspective. More than that, and why this topic is so important to me, is it explains why certain things happen in your life. It explains why you look the way that you do. It explains why you act the way that you act, why your parents were the way that they were, the type of siblings that you chose, what location you were born, the race, the culture, the religion that you were born into. Understanding what happens in between infers that every single aspect of your life was carefully, meticulously planned out. And the research that I've done into this topic has been across the board. Lots and lots of spiritual, metaphysical leaders and psychological leaders have looked into the life between lives. And that sound is my cat unrolling. She's unrolling a gold chain that I used to make jewelry, because she's a cat, and that is what cats do. Anyways, the leading research into this, in my experience, has been Edgar Cayce's information, who talked very, very heavily about reincarnation. And if you look into his studies about reincarnation, his readings on reincarnation, he talks about why souls chose the thing that they did, which speaks very much to his life purpose work, but also infers what happens in between lives, that we come down to life with such a careful plan for what we're going to do. The type of planets have to be in a very specific alignment to give us the gifts that we want. We have to choose physical bodies that will allow us to do the mission that we've signed up for. We have to face challenges and pain that's going to give us the skills we need to meet those challenges and mission. So when you look into his work, it really touches on what happens in between. Now, my favorite work on this is Michael Newton's work. Now, Michael Newton has written several books on the life between lives, and his work comes from working with clients, doing regression therapy with clients. He would take clients back to their death in this life, and what he was attempting to do is do past life regressions. Cat, hey, no. She's such a diva. Anyhow, I can like sense her gearing up to do something worse. Anyways, he wanted to take his clients to their past lives to help them figure out some of their karma, some of their soul contracts that we talked about in the last show. And what he realized when he regressed people back into their deaths and between their next birth, that there was a lot of things that were happening in those lives. So he started taking people there intentionally. Instead of going to the past life, he would take them into the between space. What happened when they died in their last incarnation? What steps did they go through? What did that look like? What jobs were there? What was life like there? And when they were prepared to come back into this life, what steps did they take in preparation for their next lives? And what Michael Newton discovered through his case studies was that there were commonalities across the board. There were things in every single case study talking about this world, this entire world outside of this physical form, where we work, we live, we love, we prepare, we study, we grow. And then these lives, these physical lives are, like I talked about last week, they're like college classes. Your final exam, even if you look at it that way, the in-between lives is all about preparation and working. That's our real existence. But sometimes we need to learn something. Sometimes we need a little bit of on-the-job training. Sometimes we need a boost in our evolutionary cycle. So we incarnate specifically to learn those lessons, to hone and evolve our soul. So tonight I'm going to be sharing information from Newton's work. I'm going to be sharing some of the Edgar Cayce stuff, as well as my own in-between life regressions. I've been lucky enough to do a couple in-between regressions myself with a friend that I went to Atlantic University with, which is Edgar Cayce's college. And what I learned about this life from doing my own in-between work was life-changing. It took me out of a place of victimhood ever again. I can never, ever again claim that the world is being cruel to me or that I am a victim. Understanding how much thought I put into this life, down to the most mundane detail, shows me how in control I really am of every aspect of my life. I could never be a victim because I created this life. I created every aspect of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's why this is so important to understand. So that you take back the driver's seat of your own life and understand your role in it and other people's role in it. They are gifting you with an experience that you set up in advance. So I'm going to get into those details very, very heavily. If you are watching live, please post your questions in the comment section below. If you're a member of Awake TV, if you're not a member of Awake TV, I'm afraid you cannot post comments here. However, if this is a topic you are interested in and you do have questions, hit me up on Facebook at Chris Alicia or send me an email at chrisalicia@intentiality.com and I will get back to you on those questions. And I've got my beautiful slides. As always, I will be checking comments throughout. Karen, hi Karen. How are you doing? And my dad's on here as well. Karen and I just spent the last week out in Mount Shasta together, which was absolutely phenomenal. It's just getting to spend time with these women was phenomenal. And my dad and Ev, my stepmother, who I haven't gotten to see in months because of this corona. Thank you so much for joining me. I love you guys so much. So let's jump right into the life between lives. And I just wanted to stop and show you my symbol for a second. This symbol came to me in a meditation multiple times while I was out in Mount Shasta. The triangle was incredibly prolific for me. And through my own studies, I understand that the triangle is the masculine symbol in sacred geometry. The eye itself, that all-seeing eye, talks about the creation of life, that cycle, that infinite cycle of death and birth. So I thought this symbol was very, very important for what we're going to be talking about today. So life between lives, the space between our incarnations. That's our real world. And I say that again because I really cannot downplay how important it is to understand where we spend the majority of our existence, where we come from. We talk about where we come from in this life as in, I'm an American, I'm Polish, I've got great mutt genes from all over Europe. Great. That is a true statement. However, bigger picture is you are a soul having a human experience. So where does your soul come from? That mystery of what happens in the spirit world has fascinated us, fascinated humans from the very beginning of time. If you look at the earliest written texts, the cave drawings, understanding God, understanding death and what happens after death have been the defining factors of humans. In fact, we are arguably the only animals on this planet that think about their deaths in the way that we do, that fear their deaths, not from a pain perspective, but because of an unknown perspective. We are so afraid of what happens when we die. And as we get older in our lives, that fear becomes even more prolific. So for this show today, I'm going to be talking about the structure of life after death. What happens at death? What happens when we leave the physical body? What does our reintegration into the spirit world look like? What do we do there? And how do we prepare to come back into this existence? So that will be the crux of the show today, starting with taking it in stages, starting with the beginning. So what happens when we die? Now, there has been more and more reports on out-of-body and near-death experiences over the last decade than I have ever seen prior to. Multiple books getting published on people who have died and been brought back. And the experiences that they talk about, that bright tunnel going through a bright tunnel, being met by their spirit guides, guides who have been with them their whole lives, meeting them and helping to walk their soul through that light tunnel. Or in some cases, family members or friends, people that are very important to you, showing up to escort your soul home. One of the most beautiful ways, one of the most beautiful pieces of information that I've heard while studying this is what death feels like. You know, I think a lot of people fear death because they don't know how much it's going to hurt. We don't like to suffer. Nobody likes to suffer. Several of the books that I've read on this and several of the case studies that I've seen on this, even doing my own past life regressions up to the point of death, is that death, there's almost like a bridge. There's a gap in time between the moment you're about to die and the actual death. There's a myopic moment where your soul is pulled out of the body. Once the body and or I guess it's once the soul has realized it's about to die, it is pulled from the body before it can feel the physical death. I've read many, many cases about this of people, especially in those near-death experiences, where they have a car crash, but instead of feeling the pain of death, they feel like they've been pulled out of the body. Some of them even remember angels or guides physically pulling them out of the body the moment before the pain hit, so that they wouldn't have to experience it. Now, that's definitely not all of the cases. I have read other cases where the suffering can linger, especially if if the soul is still conscious. But that thought that we are pulled out of the body before the moment of death is actually a very comforting one for the obvious reasons. But moreover, it's comforting because it acknowledges how protected and watched over we are. These guides, these angels, even our own soul is there to witness every aspect of our lives, to include and beyond the moment of our death, pulling us out of that. Now, that sense of calm that everybody describes in death, like being wrapped in love, and then being taken to this beautiful tunnel of light where you pass through back into the spirit world, or whatever you'd like to call that. That description that I've read about and even seen in my own regressions is very similar. Each experience is very, very similar. That feeling of going home. You are pulled from the body, which no longer, the vessel no longer has use in that lifetime. And now the soul is ready to go home. Now, the departure itself is very interesting. Now, when I was reading Newton's work, he talked about the souls having different levels of evolution. The beginning souls, the intermediate, and then the more advanced souls. The beginner souls, the younger souls, were always greeted by someone they knew and someone that was very close to them, someone that they trusted. And that soul, their guide, would help them transition through the tunnel, would help them walk back through the tunnel to get back into the spirit world. The intermediate souls often met with their spirit guides. So not necessarily a family member or a friend or someone that you knew physically in this life, but that spirit guide that you created a relationship with in the physical form. If you've done any studies on spiritual guides, it could be any of them. Many of us have multiple spirit guides that travel with us not only in this lifetime, but every lifetime. They are an absolute anchor and pillar in our existence. So they show up to help navigate souls back through the tunnel, just like a family member would. Now, the more advanced souls talked about skipping the line. they pass on, and because they've done this so many times and they are so much more evolved, their souls like jump out of the body and then just fly through the tunnel. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. I'm not waiting for nobody. I got places to be. I got things to do. That is what an advanced soul can do. What that tells me when I hear this is that those guides and those family members are there to help with the transition phase. They're help to comfort a soul that might feel shock over having left its physical vessel behind. The more advanced souls who have done that so many times don't feel the same shock. You become an old hat at the transitioning in and out, so that death and the departure just becomes another part of the journey, and a quick part of the journey. It doesn't slow you down in any way, shape, or form. So it's very interesting to think of it that way. However, if you are in any way scared of death, what this also is telling you is that you are never alone. You are not going to pass and then be alone. You are going to have somebody there for you if you need somebody there for you. The world, the cosmos, heaven, the spirit world knows exactly what you need to help with that transition, to get you from this physical body into your home realm with the least amount of pain and stress and struggle as humanly possible. Humanly possible. No pun intended. There are mechanisms set up to make that transition as painless as possible. And it's described across the board in every out-of-body experience, every near-death experience, and every in-between life's regression that I have read about. There's always that transition to help us move on. Now, the homecoming itself. I cannot call this anything but homecoming. This is our home, our real home that we're going home to. Now, when you get back, again, this is based very much on the level of the soul, but many people describe it as a reunion with all of the family members, all of the friends, everything, the pets, everything you had lost in that life at some point is there waiting for you to embrace you and welcome you home. It is the homecoming that you see in the movies. When you're walking out of that airport and there's just people there with signs and balloons and flowers, just out of their minds with joy to see you again. I've heard many descriptions of it being just like that, of it being that ultimate reunion with your people, that sense of belonging. Now, another description that I've heard quite a bit is about the way it physically looks, that souls will see buildings and parks and places that look very similar to what they experienced and knew on Earth, so that they could help with that transition as well. To give that sense of the known in this transition period is incredibly important, because the soul, again, it's in shock. It happens very quickly. So having that physical presence there of something that's important to you is completely possible. And a lot of people describe this. So if you're from New York and you pass on and you get to Central Park and there's all of your family and friends in Central Park, looks the way you remember it, much more vibrant, much more beautiful, but it's your sense of the known. It's a sense of belonging that is such an important part of the homecoming. Other souls talk about going right into a review process. And if you haven't watched that movie, Defending Your Life, with, oh gosh, the famous actress, I love her. I absolutely know who she is, regardless. These two people die, and they are sent to essentially a city where they have to review their lives to see what decisions they made, to see what relationships they had, to decide whether their soul was ready to move on, to evolve, or if it had to be put back into this queue for reincarnation. Now, Michael Newton's work and Edgar Cayce's work talked about this a lot, that there is absolutely a review process as part of the homecoming, where you sit down with your guides and review the facts of your life. Very much like going through a book report of your life. And each chapter, you're picking it apart to see what things you would do differently, what things you did well, and really breaking down the factors of your life. What did you learn? What do you still need to learn? What did you struggle with? That review process with your soul, your spirit guides, moves on to a bigger board, which a lot of the regressionists or the clients that Newton was working with called the Council of Elders. So especially the younger souls would go through a review process with their guide first. And this is not a murder board. This is not a gotcha. This is the highest level of acceptance that you can possibly imagine. This is not punishment. This is not trying to find out where you failed. It is unconditional love for every action that you've made. The younger souls prefer to go through it with their spirit guide first, especially if they're still feeling attached to that body. So you're going through it in a very laid back, comfortable place first to look through your life. And then it would move on to the Council of Elders, where you would discuss with them what's still needed for your soul to evolve, to continue to evolve. The more advanced souls talked about reviewing it on their own, although their spirit guides are absolutely there if they need them, or going right into the Council of Elders to essentially report back on your life. If you think about it in military terms, you've done a mission and now you're back and you're debriefing your leadership on your mission. That's very much what it is. It's a review of your mission, your life mission. After the review, that's when you get to really transition back into the day-to-day of the spirit world, if you will. Now, they did talk about souls that were heavily connected to the earth or had very troubled lives, very violent lives. There was a place that they described to reintegrate them more slowly. Not a punishment, not a hell in any way, shape, or form. A place where their souls could work out the trauma before being reintegrated with the rest of the souls. When I did my own dream work analysis, I realized that I was traveling in my dreams, that I was working, because I was having these reoccurring sets of dreams. So I did a regression into my dreamscape that was very similar to this type of regression you do between lives. And I saw myself traveling to an astral place, an astral plane, one of the astral planes. And in it, I saw souls that were lost, that were stuck in their heads. They were stuck in an event, a trauma that kept repeating itself in their brains to the point where their souls didn't realize that they had passed on. They weren't ready to let go of whatever that trauma was, and they kept repeating it in their heads over and over. And this plane was filled with those souls. My job on that plane was to speak to the soul to see if it was ready to move on, if it was ready to be reintegrated back with the rest of our soul community. Some were. You would explain to them that whatever that trauma was no longer a part of their lives, that trauma was not happening anymore, that it was the past, that it was okay to let it go, that they had no guilt over anything they'd experienced in that life, that life is not about guilt. It's not even about right or wrong. It's almost trial and error. we go down with the best intentions every single life to learn lessons. But we have free will. We have free will to learn the lessons or not. So the souls that get stuck into this plane are only there as long as they hold themselves there. It's really the trick of that trauma. And the ones that I saw in this regression were not there for suicides or anything else. Most of them were there out of guilt. They felt they had done something, they had hurt others. They had done something wrong to deserve to suffer. And that was the commonality that I saw on that astral plane. So that is a thing, to have that place for souls that are hurting, that are not willing to move. They're not willing to accept that they've moved on. A place for them to reintegrate more slowly. Once we actually transition, once we get through the review board, we really get to go, we get to go back into our soul groups. So this homecoming of events, what I've seen both in my own regressions and as well as Newton's work, was that once we get through the Council of Elders and we've really looked at our lives, now we get to go back into our families. We get to move back in with souls that travel with us from lifetime to lifetime. Now, in the case studies of Newton, the soul groups varied in sizes, but I would say 6 to 10 would be the average size of a soul group. And these soul groups are created at the same time. These souls are all created at the same time. And they travel together in each life. That doesn't mean they're all incarnated at the same time, but they support each other in each life. So if, for example, my father is one of my soul group members, we travel life to life to life together. That doesn't mean he has to be incarnated with me. It doesn't mean he has to be alive with me, or vice versa. We would support each other while incarnated. And we support work outside of this physical form as well. So you get to go back to your families. Now, when I did my regression and I looked around this group, trying to figure out who I knew in this lifetime, I realized that although I recognized them on an energy level, I didn't physically recognize any of them being in this carnation with me. But being that it is the spirit realm, I was able to get a sense for how many of them were on the planet at this time, and how many of them were still waiting, or how many were supporting us while we were incarnated, acting as spirit guides, acting as teachers, acting as healers. So that reintegration with our soul groups is very much your family. What I also saw in here, and Newton talked about this a little bit, was that our soul groups had adjacent groups that it dealt with on a repeated basis. So if my soul group is group A, their soul group over here, this group B over here, are antagonists in life. They're souls that we constantly bring into our sphere to teach us difficult lessons. And this soul group B will also have a group that will act as antagonists for them. And you'll have other groups that will act as beings of light in your life, that will come into your life for just a moment and do something significant and then walk away again. And other soul groups who you will not ever really integrate with or understand on an incarnated basis, because they're just kind of outside of your sphere. One of the things that Newton talks about in his case studies, which I found absolutely fascinating, was that soul groups had a collective personality. And he tells this story about this one client that he was doing a regression for, who talked about his group of souls very much like the party group. They decided jointly to have lives where they came down and just fucked up the world. Like, we're going to come down, we are going to drink, We're going to have sex. We're going to do drugs. We're not going to be big on society. We're probably going to be very, very violent. And that was very much what their soul group liked to do. They liked to come down at times of anarchy and strife and just kind of do it up. Now, their soul group was not advancing. However, they have a choice whether they want to evolve and advance or not. And this particular soul group didn't really want to. They really enjoyed partying together. So they would choose existences where they could really go and just cut loose. I am way too ambitious for that, personally. I want my soul to evolve. I thought that story was absolutely fascinating. So when I did this regression work on myself, I looked for specifically my husband's soul, and he was not among my soul group, but he was from a soul group that I can only call specialist warriors, specifically protectors. And when I did my regression and I was talking about planning for this life, I knew that his soul group, him in specific, was going to be very important for my incarnation because of that warrior energy that his soul group had cultivated over thousands of lifetimes. I recruited him to help support this life mission. And that's very much how these soul groups can go. They have a flavor to them. Mine has there was a couple other faces that I saw in my own group that are incarnated, only one of which that I'm familiar with, even though I have never met her. Others are scattered across the world at this time. And the real message that I got about my soul group, just from reintegrating for a couple of minutes, was that the work that they were doing, for the most part, was very much in the spiritual realm. It was to help with a new word of spirituality in this lifetime, to very much help to boost the spread of spiritual information. So I saw a couple other spiritual teachers that I recognized, although I've never met and may never meet in this incarnation. Our work has touched each other in different ways. Or at the very least, I know their work has touched me. So returning to your soul group is a fascinating experience. There is a dynamic to it. There is a personality to it. And we support each other. Moreover, especially the younger groups of souls, there are mentors. Your spirit guides are some of the mentors, but there's mentors that help with the entire collective of the soul to make sure everybody's kind of moving in the same direction. There are teachers' aides, more advanced souls who are still doing incarnations, who will work with the younger groups of souls as a way of evolving themselves as leaders and teachers. A lot of the spiritual teachers that you will see and meet in this incarnation have and continue to work as teachers' assistants for younger groups of souls in the spirit world. These incarnations are as much to improve our abilities to mentor others as anything else. So if you're down here in a teacher capacity, there's a pretty good chance that that's what you do when you're back in the spirit world as well. That this incarnation is to help you to be a better mentor to other souls. Really cool experience. I'm actually going to do my entire next week's show on soul groups. So I will get much, much more into that because it's just a fascinating topic to me. So what we do in between life. The best way to describe our activities, our realm, the spirit realm, is a ginormous classroom. We are constantly evolving ourselves to become divine creators, to the point where a lot of the jobs that we have in between lives are to help focus us in a creative modality. And what I mean by creation, I mean like the earth was created. Creating a planet, creating life, creating flowers, creating animals. All of these things are created by our souls. Our souls want to become even more advanced creators. It's a cyclical experience. In order to become creators, in order for all souls to evolve to the point where they become creators, you have to go through this class of life with internships and classroom experiences, and of course your college courses, which is your incarnations. So the best way that I've heard this in-between life explained is the class of life, where we are learning, where we're constantly trying to evolve to the point where now we are in the flow of all creation. And a good way to describe this for people who are not that familiar with the idea of souls being creators is we think of Earth as the only place you can incarnate. A lot of people think of that. However, before Earth, there was another planet where the majority of souls went to incarnate, and that was Pleiades, the Pleiades system. This planet was very much like Earth. The souls would go there. It was still very low energy. It had to, as a planet, the planet itself had to evolve. It had to ascend. As Pleiades was becoming more an ascended place where the vibrations were getting higher and higher, the souls still needed a place to go through that lower energy. So the Earth was created. Every aspect of Earth was created. The dirt, the molecules, the atoms, everything had to be created by souls so that the cycle could start all over. So as Pleiades was no longer at that energy in need of ascension, the Earth was created to allow those souls to go through the ascension process. As Earth ascends, another planet will be created. So that is what I mean by that cyclical process. We're getting to the point, each soul is trying to get to the point of becoming a creator to help with the ultimate cycle of life. In order to do that, we have those classes in between lives. We have those jobs in between lives where we go and we practice creation. But we also have these incarnations, which is an incredibly powerful tool of study for each and every soul and necessary. So that is the best way I can describe what we do there. We also support the other souls that are still on Earth, both in our soul groups and if you're a mentor in the soul groups that you mentor for. In fact, to think that you can only be in one place at one time is a very human thought. Even if you're in this incarnation, a part of your soul is always in the spirit realm and can go and support every other member in your soul group. I believe this is one of the reasons that people say they can feel when their family member or their friend is hurt or in danger, because a piece of your soul is with them. It's physically there with them, supporting them as a soul group. So we can be in multiple places at multiple times to support each other, to support the other souls in our groups. Even if we don't meet them in this incarnation, does not mean we're not working with them. So once we have reviewed our last life, once we have reviewed all of our lives, I'm talking going back through and doing your thesis paper to show the gaps in your life process so far, you start to decide when you're ready to reincarnate. Life selection is an absolute no joke process. This is the process of deciding down to the gnat's ass what your life is going to be like. What challenges are you going to face? What major life challenges are you going to face? What location should you be born into? Who will be born with you? What will their roles be? What body do you want to have? What physical challenges will you be born with? Every aspect of your life that we just take for granted right now is a decision. What gifts will you come down with? What motivations will you have? What passions will you have? What weaknesses will you have? All of this is so carefully considered. And how these decisions are made is very much backwards planning from that book report that you've put together on your lives. You've gone through and you said, okay, I still need X, Y, and Z. I can't get to these more advanced classes that I want to get until I get X, Y, and Z. All right. So X is really complicated, and the best way for me to learn X is to probably go through these 4 different events. Each one is going to be very, very painful in this life, but it gives me the opportunity each and every time to ensure that I learn X. So I will be born into, I need to have this situation happen when I'm a child. I need to have this situation happen in high school. I will have this situation happen at 30, and then I will hit it again at 60. I will have those 4 situations mapped out in my life plan to ensure that I learn X, to give myself the most chance of learning X. Okay, now Y and Z are a little less stressful. I could probably pepper those in throughout. Maybe I can bring in a friend to teach me a little bit of Y. They'll come in and steal my money on this occasion. They'll help me learn Y. So now that I have mapped out my goals in this life, my lessons that I need to learn, I'm going to start picking out things that will support those lessons. So what location is going to help me advance in these goals in X, Y, and Z? Well, first world country, second world country, third world country. What are my lessons that I need to learn? Okay, great. This part of the Middle East is exactly what I need to learn, Y and Z. So I'm going to choose to incarnate here in this country in the Middle East. Well, in order to learn X, because X is my most dramatic thing, I'm going to need to have a very contentious relationship with my parents. I'm going to need to bring in some souls to help me learn X, which is going to be a negative relationship with my parents, to give me a chance to learn independence and to learn strength in an abusive relationship. So I'm going to go to this adjacent soul group and say, hey, I need Bob and Sally over here to be my parents in this life to help me learn X. So you pick out the souls based on the lessons that you need, based on the locations, based on the roles that you need them to play. And you plan it out like you're planning out your blockbuster movie. Everything about it, down to the soundtrack of the movie, is incredibly intentional, hence intentionality. The souls that are coming down with you, they have their own blockbuster movies that they're playing, but God bless the fact that it's divine, because our soul missions and lives interlink in a perfect symphony and dance that you cannot possibly imagine in this lifetime. But we agree to the roles that we're going to play in each other's movies. Now, the bad guy in my movie is not necessarily, they're not playing the bad guy in their own movie. They've got their own bad guys. But they've agreed to come down and play a very specific bad guy for me, because I need that storyline in order for me to meet X, in order for me to learn my lesson. So you start having these like hardcore study groups where you go through what is needed to help your soul learn X, Y, and Z, and to help their soul learn A, B, and C. And how do we link together? How do we play these roles for each other so that our blockbuster movie is perfection? Once all of that is decided, you get to choose your body. Now, in my past life, or in my between life regression, I remember looking specifically at 3 very different body types, 3 very different bodies, 2 male and 1 female. And that was, these bodies were recommended to me by my guides as well as, some of my own suggestions based on the lessons that I needed to learn, based on the location that I was planning to incarnate. And I got to choose which body would help me learn those lessons the most effectively. And I chose this one specifically to get more attention. That's what my soul told me. It's a very narcissistic answer. But I needed a body that would stand out. So I chose a roughly 5'11" blonde female from a family of giants. So I would never blend in with society, which will make my life lessons even more potent because they're going to be more painful in some respects. It was going to be harder for me to ignore my life lessons because they were going to be very much in my face. So choosing all of these aspects gets you to a place where now you are ready to incarnate. And that is the rebirth phase. They talk about the rebirth process being very much like the process of death, very similar, going through that tunnel of light. Now, the souls that Newton worked with, as well as Edgar Cayce, really described the time of coming into the body as it depends. The soul can come into the body weeks before birth to experience the womb process and the birth itself. They can come in right at birth if they just want to experience the exit, or they can even come in after birth. The soul does not have to enter the body immediately. In fact, some souls discussed in their early lives, in their first couple of years of life, their soul was less stuck so that it could come and go from the incarnated, the vessel much more easily. It would just detach and move around more fluidly. So choosing that is a very contentious subject that I'm not really looking to get into, but when the soul goes in, completely depends on what it is they're trying to experience. Now, the so what of all of this, why does this matter? Because if you can look at every aspect of your life as a part in your blockbuster movie that you planned as the director, how does that change how you look at the people around you? How does that change how you see the things that have happened in your life, especially those big things? And from my own personal background, there are several events in my life that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt I picked to teach me major lessons. My relationship with my mother growing up, having a great and very loving relationship with her until it just wasn't. And it flipped so quickly overnight because of the drugs and the alcohol that she was doing that my soul was forced to react very, very quickly to protect myself, to figure out what was going on, and to figure out how I wanted to handle that. That event was absolutely a major event that I had put into my life in order to learn a lesson. I can't tell you with 100% certainty that I learned the lesson properly, but it absolutely was. Another situation that was undeniable for me was the cancer. Having to go through breast cancer and at the age of 30 was absolutely an event that I needed to go through to learn a lesson. The situation with my job, having gone through the sexual harassment and losing my career, these events seemed at the time so out of my control. Yet when I look back, they were such big events that really forced me to show up for myself in a way that I had not been asked to before. They asked me to find a strength that I didn't know I had before. And those lessons forged who I was. And each lesson really compounds upon itself. So that situation with my mother gave me the strength to deal with the cancer. It gave me the presence of mind to go through all of that. The cancer and the situation with my mother gave me the strength to get through the situation with my career, to be able to remake myself is, oh, I just realized that's some of the lesson. Each of those events forced me to remake and re-identify who I was, to completely remodel who I thought I was. I'm gonna have to think on that. That's a good one. Sneaky spirit. So looking at those events, not as things that were done to me, never as a victim, helped me to understand why things are happening and learn the lessons faster. The lessons don't need to necessarily be that painful, especially if you see them as lessons and not as punishment for something. This, in the reverse, goes for people that you have hurt and that you have wronged. You played a role for them. You played a very specific role for them. Now, learn from it. You don't have to react to the way that you did, especially if you feel guilt over it. But don't hang on to that guilt either, because you gifted them by playing a role for them. Just like the people who have hurt you were playing a role for you. Have gratitude for that role that they played, because they taught you something. And paying attention, doing like between life regressions, will help you to understand how their role fed who you are. And it helps you keep your eye on the prize. All souls are aiming for evolution. All souls, even that party group, will eventually evolve. Although I'm sure that they're still out there. I bet they're having a ball in this time period. All souls are aiming to grow and evolve. There are no bad souls. We are given choices when we're here. We play roles for each other. And we can absolutely go astray. We can fail to meet the goals that we set for ourselves. But the picture is bigger than that. This is a millisecond of our existence. So learning to understand that and recognize the roles that we play for each other, the lessons that we have to learn, even why we chose the physical bodies that we did. Imagine if everybody on this planet accepted their body as a gift that they chose for themselves. What would that do for the physical image that we have of our bodies? That we chose this vessel for a very specific reason. And what if we understood that reason? What if we understood why we were born into a certain place? Why we were born into a certain culture with certain religious beliefs taught to us at a young age? What if we understood why we were born with a certain skin tone, or to a certain country that didn't have running water or was constantly at war? These things are all intentional. There's a bigger picture to all of it. And I highly recommend anybody who's interested in this subject research their own in-between lives and read Michael Newton's work. Journey of the Souls and Destiny of the Souls are phenomenal books if you are interested in this subject. They will give you a much bigger understanding than just reincarnation. Reincarnation is the tip of the iceberg. All of the good stuff is happening underneath the water. So if anybody's interested in exploring this subject more or has any questions on this, please reach out to me at chrisalicia@intentionality.com. Next week, I'm going to be talking about soul groups. What goes into making up a soul group, how they interact with each other, the idea of soulmates, twin flames, all of the above. I want to spend an entire show just talking about soul groups, because understanding how we show up for each other in life is incredibly important. And we're here to support each other, whether it looks friendly on the surface or not. We are absolutely here to support each other. Every single soul on this planet is here for the same purpose, and to support each other, even if it doesn't look like it. So next week, I will be getting deep into that. Alan Schoen is next with Awakening Your Animal Family. I'm a hot mess. So please stay to check him out. Amanda Masters will be on after that. She's got her Wonder Elevated Living show. We've got Deepak Chopra joining the network to do conversations with various leaders and masters of the community. So if you are not a member of Awake TV, please try it. Try it out. There is a free trial for everybody. There's discount codes that you can look up if you're interested in doing a month or 2 months. And all shows are free for 24 hours after airing. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you took something away from this. And if nothing else, just a little bit of passion for the between lives, because that's where the good stuff happens. So until next week, I'm Chris Alicia. Thank you so much for joining me, my soul family. I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope you are kind to each other. Love and light.